My name is Isabella Chen. I'm 28, and for 25 years, my parents treated me like their personal servant while showering my younger brother Marcus with everything I ever dreamed of. What they didn't know was that while they were busy planning Marcus's future with the CEO of Meridian Industries, I had already become that CEO's most trusted business partner. The look on their faces when Jonathan Blake walked into our family dinner and called me boss was worth every sleepless night I'd spent building my empire in secret. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this wild family drama that literally changed everything overnight, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you're ready for a story about family betrayal, sweet revenge, and karma serving justice on a silver platter, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this tale of turning the tables will leave you speechless. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Growing up in the Chen household meant understanding your place in the hierarchy from day one. Marcus, my younger brother by 3 years, was the golden child who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was the invisible daughter, whose sole purpose seemed to be making everyone else's life easier. While Marcus got private tutors for everything from piano to advanced mathematics, I was expected to clean his room, do his laundry, and even complete his homework when he was too busy with his social life. My parents, David and Linda Chen, owned a moderately successful import business, but their real obsession was social climbing. They'd spend hours discussing which country club to join, which charity galas to attend, and most importantly, how to position Marcus for maximum success. Isabella, make sure Marcus's suit is pressed for the networking event, became as common as good morning in our house. I'd iron his clothes while listening to them coach him on how to impress potential business connections. The disparity in treatment was so stark it would have been comical if it weren't my reality. When Marcus wanted to study business at an expensive private university, they liquidated their retirement savings to make it happen. When I expressed interest in the same field, they handed me community college brochures and suggested I could learn practical skills there. The message was clear: my role was to support, not to succeed. What hurt most wasn't just the unequal treatment, it was the complete dismissal of my potential. I had graduated valedictorian from high school, scored in the 99th percentile on standardized tests, and had been accepted to several prestigious universities with partial scholarships. But my parents saw these achievements as less valuable than Marcus's average grades and charming personality. Isabella is book smart, but Marcus has people skills, they'd explain to relatives, as if intelligence and charisma were mutually exclusive. The breaking point came during my senior year of high school. I had saved every dollar from my part-time job at a local cafe, planning to use it for college application fees and deposits. One evening, I came home to find my parents counting my money at the kitchen table. Marcus needs this for his spring break trip with his fraternity brothers, my mother announced without looking up. It's important for networking. When I protested, my father's response cut deep: don't be selfish, Isabella. Your brother's future is more important than your hobbies. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If my family wouldn't invest in my future, I'd build one myself. I started researching business opportunities, reading every entrepreneurship book I could find, and studying successful companies online. While my family slept, I'd be hunched over our old computer, learning about market analysis, supply chain management, and international trade, ironically, the same industry my parents worked in, though they never thought to include me in those conversations. The injustice of it all fueled my determination. Every time I had to serve Marcus breakfast in bed because he was too tired from partying, every occasion I had to lie to his professors about why his assignments were late, every moment I watched my parents beam with pride over his mediocre accomplishments while ignoring my actual successes, it all became fuel for the fire burning inside me. I started small, using my cafe job to network with the business owners who came in for their morning coffee. I offered to help them with social media marketing, bookkeeping, and administrative tasks for a small fee. Within months, I had a handful of clients and a growing reputation for reliability and innovation. My parents remained completely oblivious, too focused on Marcus's college social life to notice that their servant daughter was quietly building a business empire. The irony wasn't lost on me that while they groomed Marcus to eventually take over their import business, I was already learning the industry from the ground up through my clients. I understood supply chains, international regulations, and market dynamics better than Marcus ever would, but in their eyes, I was still just the girl who did the dishes and kept the house running. College became my escape and my launching pad simultaneously. I chose a state school not because I couldn't get into better ones, but because the lower tuition meant I could graduate debt-free, while my parents focused their financial resources on Marcus's expensive private education. What they saw as me settling for less was actually me making a strategic choice that would pay dividends later. My business studies courses were just the formal education I needed to supplement what I was learning in the real world. By my sophomore year, I had expanded my client base to include several mid-sized companies who needed consulting on market entry strategies and operational efficiency. My professors were impressed by the practical knowledge I brought to classroom discussions, though I never mentioned where this experience came from. The real breakthrough came when I met Sarah Martinez, a supply chain executive at a major corporation who became my first serious mentor. She recognized something in me that my own family never had: raw talent combined with relentless work ethic. "You have an intuitive understanding of global markets that most people take decades to develop," she told me after I'd presented a market analysis that saved her company 6 figures in potential losses. Sarah introduced me to her network, and suddenly I was consulting for Fortune 500 companies while still living in my childhood bedroom, washing Marcus's dishes, and listening to my parents plan his post-graduation job search. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. During the day, I'd be in boardrooms presenting strategies to senior executives. At night, I'd be doing Marcus's laundry because my parents insisted I contribute more to household responsibilities. My breakthrough client was Meridian Industries, initially a small tech startup with big ambitions, but limited understanding of international markets. Jonathan Blake, the young CEO, hired me to help them expand into Asian markets, an area where my cultural background and business acumen created the perfect storm of expertise. What started as a 3-month consulting contract turned into an ongoing partnership that would eventually transform both our companies. Jonathan was different from other clients. He valued results over pedigree and had an instinct for spotting talent regardless of where it came from. When my strategies helped Meridian secure 3 major contracts in their first year of international expansion, he offered me something unprecedented: an equity stake in the company and a position as Chief Strategy Officer. The offer came with one condition: I'd need to relocate and work full-time, which meant leaving my family's house and the elaborate charade I'd been maintaining. It was terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. 4 years, I'd been living this double life where my family saw me as their unpaid domestic help, while the business world increasingly saw me as a rising star in international trade and strategic consulting. I accepted Jonathan's offer, but decided to keep it secret from my family initially. I told them I'd found a better administrative job that required some travel, which explained my frequent absences. They were too focused on Marcus's post-graduation job search to dig deeper into my supposed career change. Meanwhile, I was helping build Meridian from a promising startup into a major player in the tech industry. The work was intense, but rewarding in ways I'd never experienced. Jonathan gave me complete autonomy over international expansion, and my strategies were directly responsible for Meridian's growth from a $2 million company to a $50 million industry leader within 3 years. My equity stake, initially worth almost nothing, was now worth more than my parents' entire net worth. But perhaps the most satisfying part was watching my expertise compound. Every successful deal made me more valuable, every strategic win enhanced my reputation, and every quarter of growth validated what I had always known. I had the talent and drive to succeed at the highest levels of business. The girl my parents saw as only capable of domestic work was becoming a recognized expert in international markets and strategic development. The hardest part was maintaining the facade at home. My parents would critique my simple administrative job, while I was simultaneously negotiating million-dollar deals and being courted by headhunters from top consulting firms. Marcus would complain about his entry-level marketing position at a local company, while I was being invited to speak at industry conferences about global expansion strategies. By my 4th year at Meridian, the company had grown beyond anyone's wildest expectations. We'd successfully entered 15 international markets, secured partnerships with major global brands, and Jonathan was being recognized as one of the most innovative CEOs in the tech industry. My role had evolved from consultant to genuine business partner. I owned 12% of the company and had a seat on the board of directors. The interesting development was watching my family's growing obsession with Meridian Industries and Jonathan Blake specifically. My father had noticed the company's rapid growth and began researching their business model with the kind of intensity he'd never shown in my actual achievements. "This Jonathan Blake is exactly the kind of person Marcus should be working for," he'd announce over dinner, completely unaware that I saw Jonathan every day and that my strategies were behind much of his success. My parents began crafting elaborate plans to get Marcus noticed by Meridian's leadership team. They researched Jonathan's background, his interests, his philanthropic activities, everything they could use to engineer a chance encounter. It was fascinating to watch them put more effort into researching my business partner than they'd ever put into understanding my career or aspirations. The plan they settled on was both ambitious and revealing of their priorities. They would host an elaborate dinner party, ostensibly to celebrate Marcus's recent promotion at his marketing job, but really designed to attract the attention of the city's business elite. The guest list read like a who's who of local entrepreneurs and executives, with Jonathan Blake as their ultimate target. Watching them plan this event was like getting a masterclass in social manipulation. My mother researched the dietary preferences of every potential guest, my father studied conversation topics that might interest Jonathan, and Marcus was coached on talking points that might showcase his business acumen. The amount of strategic thinking they put into this dinner party exceeded anything they'd ever done for my actual education or career development. What they didn't know was that Jonathan and I had been discussing this very invitation for weeks. He'd received the formal invitation and immediately asked me about it, knowing my last name and wondering about the connection. When I explained the family dynamic, his first reaction was protective anger, but then we both realized the opportunity this presented. "They want to impress me to help your brother's career," Jonathan had said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Meanwhile, they have no idea that you're the person who built most of what they are trying to leverage." We decided that rather than declining the invitation, we'd attend and see how the evening unfolded naturally. The preparation phase was torture. My parents assigned me every possible task related to the dinner party. Menu planning, decoration setup, coordination with caterers, managing ISVPs, even polishing silverware until it gleamed. I was essentially producing the event designed to impress my business partner, while being treated like hired help by people who shared my DNA. "Isabella, make sure the wine glasses are spotless," my mother instructed while simultaneously coaching Marcus on impressive anecdotes to share with Jonathan. "And remember, you're serving tonight, so wear something nice, but not too nice, you don't want to upstage the actual guests." The irony was overwhelming. I was being instructed to serve wine to the CEO, who regularly sought my advice on major business decisions. I was polishing silverware for the man who credited me with transforming his company's trajectory. I was being told to fade into the background at an event designed to impress someone who considered me an indispensable business partner. Marcus, meanwhile, was practicing his pitch about innovative marketing strategies and digital engagement, topics I'd been successfully implementing at Meridian for years. My parents had hired a speaking coach to help him present confidently, while never once asking about my own professional experiences or achievements. The most revealing moment came when my father pulled me aside the week before the dinner. "Isabella, I need you to understand how important this evening is for our family's future," he said with unusual seriousness. "Marcus has real potential to work for someone like Jonathan Blake, but first impressions matter. Your job is to make sure everything runs perfectly so nothing distracts from Marcus's opportunity to shine." Standing there, listening to my father explain why my role was to facilitate my brother's success with my own business partner, I felt a clarity I'd never experienced before. This wasn't just about favoritism or gender bias. This was about a fundamental inability to see me as anything other than a supporting character in someone else's story. The evening of the dinner party arrived with my parents in a state of nervous excitement I'd rarely witnessed. They'd transformed our modest family home into something resembling a high-end restaurant, complete with professional lighting, floral arrangements, and a jazz quartet playing softly in the corner. The guest list included 15 of the city's most prominent business leaders, but everyone knew the real prize was Jonathan Blake's attendance. I spent the afternoon in my assigned role as invisible coordinator, ensuring every detail met my mother's exacting standards while watching Marcus practice his talking points one final time. He'd rehearse stories about innovative marketing campaigns, disruptive business models, and strategic vision, all topics I'd been implementing at Meridian while he'd been struggling with basic social media metrics at his entry-level job. As guests began arriving, I moved seamlessly between kitchen and dining room, ensuring drinks were filled and conversations flowed smoothly. The other attendees barely noticed me, which was exactly how my parents preferred it. I was background music, there to facilitate their social ambitions without drawing attention to myself. Jonathan arrived fashionably late, exactly as we'd discussed. Watching my parents' faces light up when he walked through the door was both amusing and heartbreaking. Here was the validation they'd been seeking for months. The successful CEO they'd researched, studied, and strategically courted was now in their home, presumably to be impressed by Marcus's potential. The first hour proceeded exactly as my parents had orchestrated. Marcus dominated Jonathan's attention, sharing carefully rehearsed anecdotes about his marketing insights and business philosophy. Jonathan played his part perfectly, asking thoughtful questions and showing genuine interest in Marcus's responses. To an outside observer, it looked like a promising young professional making an excellent impression on a successful mentor. I continued serving, refilling glasses, and ensuring the evening flowed smoothly, all while listening to Marcus explain marketing strategies that were years behind what Meridian was already implementing. The disconnect between perception and reality was staggering. My parents were watching their golden child impress the CEO, who relied on my strategies for his company's success. But something shifted during the main course. Jonathan began asking Marcus more specific questions about international market expansion, supply chain optimization, and strategic partnerships, areas where Marcus's rehearsed answers quickly became inadequate. I watched my brother's confidence falter as Jonathan's questions moved beyond surface-level marketing concepts into the complex territory where I'd been operating for years. The moment that changed everything came when Jonathan asked Marcus about emerging opportunities in Southeast Asian markets. Marcus fumbled through a generic response about cultural sensitivity and market research, clearly out of his depth. Jonathan listened politely, then said something that made my heart stop. "That's interesting. My chief strategy officer has a completely different perspective on that region. Her analysis has been instrumental in our expansion there." The conversation continued, but I noticed Jonathan's attention beginning to shift. He started scanning the room during Marcus's responses, and I realized with growing anticipation that the evening was about to take a dramatic turn. This was the moment we'd discussed, but hadn't fully planned, when Jonathan would naturally transition from polite interest in Marcus to recognition of the real strategic mind in the room. My parents were still beaming with pride, completely unaware that their carefully orchestrated evening was about to implode. Marcus was gaining confidence again, thinking he'd recovered from his earlier stumble, while the other guests watched what they assumed was a young professional making a valuable connection. Then Jonathan did something that would change my family dynamics forever. He stood up, asked for everyone's attention, and said, "I have to share something remarkable with all of you. You know, we spend so much time in business looking for talented people in all the wrong places." He paused, scanning the room until his eyes found mine near the kitchen doorway. Sometimes the most brilliant strategic minds are hiding in plain sight, doing the work that actually matters while others take credit for the results. The room went completely silent. My parents looked confused, Marcus appeared nervous, and I felt my pulse accelerating as Jonathan continued. "I've had the privilege of working with some exceptional people, but none more impressive than my chief strategy officer and business partner, who's been responsible for transforming our company from a promising startup into an industry leader." He walked across the room toward me, and I saw my mother's face begin to change as she realized what was happening. "Isabella," Jonathan said, extending his hand with a warm smile, "thank you for making this evening possible. But I think it's time these people knew who you really are." The silence that followed was deafening. You know, moments like these make you realize how life can change in an instant. Sometimes the people closest to us are the last to see our true potential, and sometimes it takes an outsider to reveal what was hidden all along. If you're enjoying this family drama and want to see how this revelation completely transforms everything, make sure you're subscribed, because the aftermath is going to be absolutely incredible. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. I watched my parents' faces cycle through confusion, recognition, and then something approaching horror, as the implications of Jonathan's words sank in. Marcus's mouth literally fell open, and several guests began whispering among themselves, clearly trying to understand the sudden shift in dynamics. My father was the first to break the silence, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. "Isabella, what is he talking about?" The way he said my name, like he was seeing me for the first time, would have been satisfying if it weren't so devastating to witness a lifetime of dismissal crystallize into one moment of shocked recognition. Jonathan, completely unaware of the family drama he'd just unleashed, continued enthusiastically, "Your daughter has been my most trusted advisor for 4 years. She's the architect behind our entire international expansion strategy, and frankly, Meridian wouldn't exist in its current form without her vision and expertise." I stood frozen near the kitchen doorway, holding a wine bottle, watching 28 years of family mythology crumble in real time. My mother was staring at me like I was a stranger who'd somehow infiltrated her dinner party, while Marcus looked between Jonathan and me with an expression of complete bewilderment. "There must be some mistake," my mother said, her voice carrying that particular tone of forced politeness she used when reality didn't match her expectations. "Isabella works in administration. She helps with filing and scheduling." The words hung in the air, sounding more ridiculous with each syllable. Jonathan's expression shifted as he began to understand the family dynamic. "Administration." He looked genuinely confused. "Isabella owns 12% of Meridian Industries and sits on our board of directors. She's negotiated partnerships worth hundreds of millions of dollars and revolutionized how we approach international markets." The impact of these words on my family was like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. My father's face went through several color changes before settling on an unhealthy shade of gray. Marcus actually sat down heavily in his chair, as if his legs couldn't support him anymore. But my mother's reaction was the most telling. She looked at me with something approaching betrayal, as if I had personally deceived her by being more successful than she'd imagined possible. But you live at home," she stammered, grasping for some explanation, that would make this revelation less earth-shattering. You do the cleaning and cooking. You take care of Marcus's things. Jonathan's eyebrows shot up at this information. Isabella, you never mentioned living with family. Then, with dawning understanding, wait, you mean you've been building a multi-million-dollar business strategy career while also working as domestic help for your own family? The question hung in the air like an accusation, and suddenly every guest in the room was staring at my parents with expressions ranging from confusion to judgment. The successful business leaders they'd invited to impress were now witnessing the revelation that they'd been treating their accomplished daughter like hired help while trying to promote their mediocre son. Mr. Patterson, the CEO of a major manufacturing company, was the first guest to speak. Isabella, I've been following Meridian's growth in the trade publications. Your supply chain innovations have been revolutionary. I had no idea David and Linda were your parents. The way he said it made it clear that knowing they were my parents didn't reflect well on them. My father tried to recover some dignity. Well, of course we are proud of Isabella's work. We just didn't realize it had become so significant. But his voice lacked conviction, and everyone in the room could hear the hollow ring of someone trying to rewrite history in real time. Marcus finally found his voice. Isabella, why didn't you tell us? All this time, I thought you were just. I mean, we all thought. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence that would have revealed exactly how little my family thought of my potential. I tried to tell you, I said quietly, my voice carrying years of suppressed frustration. I tried to share my achievements, my goals, my successes. But every time I mentioned my work, you assumed it was clerical. Every time I talked about business strategy, you changed the subject to Marcus's career. Every time I accomplished something significant, you found a way to minimize it or ignore it completely. The truth of this statement was undeniable. I could see recognition dawning in my parents' eyes as they remembered countless conversations where they'd dismissed my attempts to share my professional life. They'd been so convinced that I was incapable of significant achievement that they'd literally been unable to hear evidence to the contrary. Jonathan, now fully grasping the situation, looked around the room with barely contained amazement. Let me understand this correctly. You invited me here hoping I'd hire Marcus, while Isabella, who's actually my business partner, and one of the most brilliant strategic minds I've ever worked with, was serving drinks and arranging flowers. The guests were now openly staring at my parents with expressions that ranged from bewilderment to barely concealed disdain. The social climbing evening they'd planned had become a public expose of their treatment of their own daughter. Mrs. Rodriguez, a prominent attorney who'd built her own firm from nothing, spoke with ice-cold precision. David, Linda, I think you owe Isabella an enormous apology. What I'm hearing suggests years of taking her contributions for granted while investing in other priorities. The aftermath of Jonathan's revelation was swift and merciless. Word spread through our city's business community faster than my parents could have imagined possible. Within a week, the story of the dinner party had become local legend, the tale of successful business owners who'd been so focused on promoting their average son that they'd completely missed their daughter's transformation into a major business leader. My father's import business began feeling the impact immediately. Several of his long-term clients started asking pointed questions about his judgment and family values. If David Chen can't recognize talent in his own daughter, how can we trust his business instincts? Became a common refrain in the business circles my parents had spent years trying to penetrate. The social consequences were equally devastating. Country club applications were quietly withdrawn, charity board positions became unavailable, and the networking events they'd once attended religiously suddenly had no space for them. The business community they'd worked so hard to impress was now viewing them as cautionary tale about blindness to talent and the dangers of favoritism. Marcus took the revelation hardest of all. His entire identity had been built on being the golden child with unlimited potential, while I was the sister who handled mundane tasks. Learning that I'd been operating at levels he couldn't even comprehend, while he struggled with basic marketing metrics, shattered something fundamental in his self-perception. "I don't understand how this happened," he said to me one evening, looking genuinely lost. "I was supposed to be the successful one. That was always the plan. You were supposed to." He couldn't finish the sentence, but we both knew what he meant. I was supposed to remain small so he could feel large. My parents' attempts to control the narrative were pathetic and revealing. They tried to claim they'd always known about my success and had been supportively allowing me to find my own path. But their explanations rang hollow to anyone who'd witnessed the dinner party disaster or heard the details from other guests. My mother's reaction was particularly telling. Instead of celebrating my achievements or apologizing for years of dismissal, she focused on feeling betrayed by my secrecy. "How could you hide something this important from your own family?" she demanded, as if my professional success was somehow a personal affront to her. "I didn't hide it, Mom," I replied with newfound calm. "I tried to share it countless times. You just couldn't hear it because it didn't fit your narrative about who I was supposed to be." The most satisfying change was watching people's behavior toward me shift completely. Business leaders who'd barely acknowledged me at previous social events were now seeking me out for advice and partnership opportunities. The respect I'd earned in the business world was finally being recognized in my personal life as well. Jonathan, meanwhile, had become fiercely protective of me and openly critical of how my family had treated me. "Isabella is the most talented strategist I've ever worked with," he told anyone who would listen. "The fact that her own family couldn't see that says everything about them, and nothing about her." The offers started pouring in. Headhunters from major consulting firms, venture capital partnerships, board positions at established companies, opportunities that would have seemed impossible months earlier were now competing for my attention. My equity stake in Meridian was worth more than my parents' lifetime savings, and my reputation in the business community was stronger than anything they'd ever achieved. But perhaps the most telling moment came when my father attempted to salvage something from the wreckage. He approached me with a business proposal, suggesting that I could help modernize his import company and maybe even eventually take it over. The audacity was breathtaking. After years of treating me like domestic help, he wanted to leverage my success to save his failing reputation. "Dad," I said, looking at him with a mixture of pity and finality, "you spent 28 years teaching me that my value to this family was as a servant to Marcus's ambitions. You can't rewrite that history just because it's now inconvenient." The conversation ended with him storming out, unable to accept responsibility for the choices that had led to this moment. My mother continued alternating between attempts to claim credit for my success and accusations that I'd deliberately deceived them about my capabilities. Marcus, to his credit, eventually approached me with something resembling genuine remorse. "I'm sorry, Isabella," he said one evening. "I got so used to being treated like I was special that I forgot you were special too. Actually, you were always more special, weren't you?" It was the first honest conversation we'd had in years, and while it couldn't undo decades of family dysfunction, it at least acknowledged the reality we'd all been living with. 6 months after the dinner party that changed everything, I was sitting in my new corner office at Meridian's expanded headquarters, reviewing acquisition proposals that would make me one of the youngest executives to lead a billion-dollar buyout. The girl who'd been told her administrative job wasn't important enough to discuss at family dinner was now being profiled in Forbes as one of the top strategic minds in international business. The sweetest victory wasn't just my professional success, it was watching the natural consequences of years of poor judgment finally catch up with my parents. Their import business had lost 60% of its client base, as word spread about their treatment of me. Several major suppliers had terminated contracts, explicitly citing concerns about working with people who demonstrated such poor character judgment. Marcus had been let go from his marketing position after his productivity plummeted following our family revelations. Learning that his supposedly inferior sister was actually operating at levels he couldn't comprehend had triggered what his therapist called a complete identity crisis. He moved back in with my parents and spent most days playing video games and questioning everything he'd believed about himself and his prospects. My parents' social standing had evaporated completely. The country club they desperately wanted to join had not only rejected their application, but had also made it clear that future applications would be unwelcome. The charity boards they'd hoped to influence were now using their story as an example of how not to treat family members. They'd become pariahs in the very social circles they'd spent decades trying to penetrate. But the most poetic justice came when Jonathan decided to establish Meridian's new Asian operations headquarters in our city, making it the largest tech employer in the region. As Chief Strategy Officer, I became one of the most powerful business leaders in town, the kind of person my parents had spent years trying to impress, except now I was their estranged daughter, who'd achieved everything they'd dreamed of while they'd been busy dismissing my potential. The job offers kept coming. Google wanted me to lead their international expansion team. McKinsey offered a partner-track position that would have made me one of their youngest partners ever. 3 different venture capital firms offered me positions that came with equity stakes worth more than most people's lifetime earnings. I turned them all down. Not because I lacked ambition, but because I'd found something more valuable than any single career opportunity. I'd discovered my own worth independent of anyone else's validation. The girl who'd spent her childhood seeking approval from people who couldn't see her value had grown into a woman who created value that was impossible to ignore. The final twist came when the city's business council asked me to speak at their annual leadership conference, the same event my parents had attended for years hoping to network with influential people. I accepted the invitation and delivered a keynote address about recognizing talent in unexpected places and the dangers of allowing bias to blind us to potential. My parents were in the audience, having purchased tickets before realizing I was the featured speaker. Watching them squirm as I discussed family dynamics that discourage achievement and the importance of supporting talent regardless of where it comes from was more satisfying than any revenge I could have planned. During the Q&A session, someone asked about my background and how I'd developed such strategic expertise at a young age. I looked directly at my parents and said, "I learned early that you can't wait for recognition or permission to pursue excellence. Sometimes the people closest to you are the last ones to see your potential, so you have to believe in yourself enough to prove them wrong." The standing ovation that followed was thunderous, but the real victory was seeing my parents' faces as they realized that their daughter, the one they'd treated like hired help, was now the most respected business leader in the room. After my speech, several attendees approached my parents to congratulate them on my success, apparently unaware of our family dynamics. I watched from across the room as they struggled to accept praise for achievements they'd actively discouraged and success they'd never believed possible. The strangest part of this entire journey has been realizing that their treatment of me, while painful, actually prepared me for business success in ways traditional support might not have. Years of having my contributions minimized made me resilient to criticism. Decades of being underestimated taught me to let results speak louder than words. A lifetime of being overlooked showed me the power of working behind the scenes until you're ready to step into the spotlight. Looking back, I understand that my parents' inability to see my potential was their limitation, not mine. They were so invested in a particular vision of success, one that centered Marcus and marginalized me, that they literally couldn't process evidence that contradicted their beliefs. In trying to make me small, they taught me to build something too big to ignore. The karma in this situation wasn't something I orchestrated or planned. It was simply the natural consequence of treating talented people poorly while expecting recognition for work they never did. My parents wanted to impress successful business leaders without recognizing that they already had one in their family. They wanted social status based on their children's achievements while actively discouraging their most achievable child. Now they are experiencing the flip side of their choices. The son they invested everything in is struggling with basic independence, while the daughter they treated like domestic help is being courted by Fortune 500 companies. The business community they wanted to join has rejected them because of how they treated me, while I've become a leader in that same community despite their lack of support. So here's what I want to know from all of you who've stuck with this story. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have supported you most? Have you watched someone take credit for work you did or minimize achievements you earned through your own effort? How did you handle family dynamics that made you feel invisible or undervalued? Drop your experiences in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories remind me why sharing this journey matters. If this tale of family karma and justice served resonated with you, smash that like button and hit subscribe for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building success despite the odds. And please share this with anyone who needs to hear that sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember, your family's inability to see your worth doesn't diminish your actual value. Sometimes the greatest gift dysfunctional families give us is the motivation to prove them spectacularly wrong. Keep building your empire, keep believing in your potential, and never let anyone make you small enough to fit their limited vision of who you should be. The best success stories often begin with someone refusing to accept other people's definitions of their limitations. Trust me on this one, I'm living proof that karma has a perfect sense of timing and an even better sense of justice.